Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in just another minute. So it's not quite 1 o'clock. So if you just want to settle back and get ready, we'll be starting momentarily. All right, everyone, welcome to our first session of the AIgnite Monthly Spark. My goal with these sessions is to answer your questions and work to address your concerns around generative AI as it pertains to higher education. So towards that end, if you have questions or concerns, if you'd like to drop them in the chat, I am monitoring that this afternoon during our session. And I would also welcome those questions for inclusion in a future monthly talk. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So I figure out all of my controls. Too many screens. All right. So today we're going to talk about responsible content creation using generative AI tools. And I originally created this as a student's guide to help them navigate this ever-changing technology. I'm your host today. My name is Lisa Blue. I am an instructional specialist in STEM-H teaching and learning here at the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning at Eastern Kentucky University. I am not a computer science major, just to get that out of the way. I'm actually a chemist by training, but this summer I was tasked with discovering what was going to be the largest challenge for my faculty this fall, and generative AI technologies took the cake on that one. All right. So why should students care about generative AI technologies? When I gave this talk about a month ago to a student group, I got a lot of shrugged shoulders. Maybe you're feeling the same way. Maybe you're in the opposite camp and you're seeing a lot of Gen AI submissions showing up in the homework. Regardless, we're seeing lots of newly AI supported products debuting almost daily. Take for example, Microsoft's Copilot, which they've been threatening to launch since March 16th of this year. They recently began rolling it out September 26th. So Microsoft's Copilot is an AI enhancement to all Microsoft tools and platforms. Quietly and without much fanfare, Adobe rolled out its AI called Firefly. And in reviewing different learning management systems, I've discovered that both Canvas by Instructure and Blackboard by Anthology are promising AI technologies. So these products are showing up everywhere. And as an educator, I've found these showing up in my day-to-day operations. There are also numerous standalone artificial intelligence tools, and the number increases daily. So I like to check on this website called there'sAIforthat.com. It tracks most of the AIs that are worth looking at. And as of Monday, we had 8,367 standalone AIs. If that's not enough to convince you or your students that it's time to start talking about generative AI, note that a recent survey of Fortune 500 chief human resource officers uncovered a lot of apprehension about how AI is going to replace jobs. So most of them saw AI replacing jobs at their organization in the next 3 years at a level of 72%. When employees were surveyed, it was found that more than half of employees say they don't feel prepared to work with AI, robotics, or other advanced technologies, while 1 in 4 say they are not at all prepared. A recent paper came out from the Harvard Business School Technology and Operations Management Unit, and it was originally posted September 18th. And because of the rapidly evolving technology, they just keep updating the paper. The key points from the paper were that they set up a situation where consultants were tasked with using artificial intelligence, so this generative artificial intelligence, to accomplish a set of tasks. We found that we had three groups of consultants. The first group did not use AI, and that's the group in blue. The group in red used AI with some coaching about how to use AI, and I believe it was the group in green that were just turned loose on the AI. It was found that the consultants using the generative AI technologies were able to finish tasks 12% more quickly on average, finished 12% more tasks on average, completed those tasks 25% more quickly, and produced 40% higher quality results than those without the generative AI technology at their disposal. So in that same paper, the researchers talk about the jagged frontier of AI capabilities. The results you just saw were well within the frontier of AI capabilities. So this blue line that kind of loops around here is a general measure of AI abilities. And this frontier is moving constantly as new technologies are being deployed. This dotted line represents equal difficulty tasks. And some of these tasks will fall inside the frontier, meaning that generative AI is perfectly well suited to accomplish said task, while some tasks fall well outside the frontier. And it's sometimes hard to know where that frontier is on a day-to-day basis unless you use the generative AI frequently. So inside the frontier, the researchers found and reported in this paper that AI was a skill leveler. If you look on the left, the bottom half of participants had a performance score of 4.05 on the baseline task. With AI, they were able to improve their performance by 43%. The top half of skilled participants went from an average score of 5.2 to 6.06, so they also saw some modest gains. But you see, this AI really served to level the playing field. So keep this study in mind because we'll refer back to it in just a bit. So how does generative AI work? It's really important to understand what these computer models are doing so that we can understand where that jagged frontier may be on a given day. So we've all heard of GPT, where GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformers. This is a type of neural net that debuted in 2018. Generative is an improvement over previous models that were discriminatory. The discriminatory models were simply able to look at images of animals, for example, and say, yes, that is a cat. No, that is not a cat. And so they were discriminative. The generative models are the next step forward in that you can give them a prompt and they can generate their own image based on the data they've been trained on. These models are pre-trained on immense data sets, often with reinforcement learning through human feedback. It's important to take note of where these data sets come from, though. These are not our peer-reviewed journals. These are not vetted sources. It's the Wild West, whatever is out there on the World Wide Web. And then transformers refer to a type of machine learning. So if we look at an example of what these GPT models that are driving these large language models are doing, we see that each of these words, so this is an example from the Pangu Alpha architecture. Pangu Alpha is a large language model that was trained on 1.1 terabytes of Chinese data. And we see that if we take this sentence, Boz the cat sat on the first thing this large language model does is tokenize each of these words. So it's taking note of both what is the word, but also where is this word positioned in the sentence. Once it takes that information, it passes it through these transformer layers in these green rectangles. These transformer layers are just a special type of neural net. And as the information is processed through these transformers, the output is a statistical prediction based on, hey, position 6 in this sentence, what is the most likely word to complete the sentence? Well, in this case, it's going to be Matt. So it's important to realize that there are no reasoning capabilities here. It's simply a statistical text predictor. We're working daily to improve these AIs, and one way of doing so is using chain of thought prompting. So if you look at the model input on the left here, we can use traditional chain of thought prompting where we give a question and we give an example answer. This is how we want the model to answer us. And so we're training the model on the proper output. We then ask it a new question, and then the model output is shown in green. So this is chain of thought prompting. Researchers have found, though, we can also do what's called zero-shot chain of thought. So rather than giving a question, an answer, and then another question, researchers have been able to get similar output by simply saying, let's think step by step before we answer the question. We're not really sure why that works. One thing that has been pretty consistent is that the mathematicians and the physicists are not in danger of losing their jobs anytime soon. Math test performance has been kind of tricky. The AIs have been getting math wrong. And so to improve that process, each step that is correct is rewarded, seems to improve the overall output for accuracy, as opposed to outcome supervision, where only the correct final answer is rewarded. That being said, Google DeepMind in the last 2 weeks found that if they did a single shot chain of thought prompting by adding the phrase, take a deep breath, and work this step by step. By telling a computer to take a deep breath, they increase the accuracy of the output. All right, so that's bizarre. We're not sure why it works. So now the question is, do we really want to embrace this technology, or do we want to be hesitant about it? All right, so recently the movie Oppenheimer has come out, and Oppenheimer has been considered a cautionary tale. And I like this quote from a book on the topic, The Making of the Atomic Bomb. And Robert Oppenheimer is quoted as saying, "It is a profound and necessary truth that the deep things in science are not found because they are useful. They are found because it was possible to find them." So now that we've found this technology, how are we going to use it responsibly? The U.S. Department of Education recently published a white paper, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Teaching and Learning. And in this white paper, they added some insights and recommendations. And so the text in black includes their insights and recommendations. I've added some of this in blue. And so we'll go through each of these step by step. We have to worry about inaccuracies in the data sets that these AIs are trained on. So going back to my beloved Oppenheimer movie, there's a point in the movie where Han and Strassman are reported to have split the uranium atom, and this kicks the whole race to create an atomic bomb into high gear. As soon as they said Han and Strassman split the atom, I wanted to come up out of my seat because I knew that wasn't quite right. In fact, if you go to the Manhattan Project website, in purple you see, they quote, "It was December 1938 when the radiochemist Otto Hahn, above with Lisa Meitner and Fritz Strassmann, while bombarding elements with neutrons in the Berlin laboratory made their unexpected discovery. So even the website that is documenting what has happened is showing some inaccuracies here. In 1938, we were talking about pre-war Nazi Germany. And in fact, when this discovery was made, Lisa Meitner, who herself was a female Jew, had already fled to Sweden. Left behind were Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann. In December of 1938, Hahn wrote to Meitner and said, I've got this idea of uranium is actually fusing to create radium, but for some reason, the radium is behaving chemically like barium. Didn't matter. He went ahead and published his findings without waiting for Meitner to reply from her safe space in Sweden. Meitner followed up in 1939 with a letter to Nature explaining that, well, it's not actually a fusion process, it's a fission process, and it's not radium that is produced, it's actually barium. So even though Hahn published this paper and was unable to explain the results and inappropriately identified the product as radium, Lisa Meitner had been working closely with him this entire time, and she was able to explain the results. Unfortunately, because she was a female Jew hiding in Sweden, and Hahn was working in Berlin, he couldn't co-publish this information with Lisa Meitner because it would have cost him his career. So all over the interwebs, anytime any of these generative AIs are crawling for information, they're seeing that Otto Hahn was the German chemist and winner of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for his discovery of nuclear fission. So we've got to watch out for those historical inaccuracies. More generally speaking, we see that data sets used to train these generative AI technologies are so large that they can only be analyzed using computational methods. And even then, how do you explain the worldviews that are present? How do you dip your toe in the collective conscious of humanity and say, we believe this, we feel that, And so because of that, we see that the earliest model of GPT that was released, GPT-3, that data set overrepresented men, white people, Western viewpoints, and English language patterns. There are a lot more examples of bias in the generative AI spaces, but we're going to limit it to just this little discussion today. We also have to stay on point about our privacy concerns. When these AIs are being trained on data, that becomes part of the public collective knowledge. So students need to always assume that the AIs are storing all of their information. So encourage them not to supply personal information about themselves, about anybody. So we've kind of covered the biases and inaccuracies. Privacy concerns are always going to be present, but we also have to concern ourselves with equity issues. The current popular large language models that students are likely to play around with include ChatGPT 3.5, which is free, and ChatGPT 4, which in recent reading is still seen as probably the front runner of the large language models as being the more accurate and most powerful. It's stuck behind a paywall. So I immediately start concerning myself with, well, what about those of us who can only access ChatGPT 3.5? That becomes a problem, and I'll show you why in some examples. There is a workaround though. Microsoft Bing Chat does use ChatGPT 4 for free. So as long as you can use that chat feature in Bing, you can access this powerful technology. Google Bard is free, but its state of mind is concerning. It doesn't always get great results. I heard a fellow academician refer to Google Bard as their drunk uncle. They're kind of fun to talk to, but don't always give you great stuff to work with. Google will be debuting Gemini coming soon, and it's said to rival ChatGPT 4. And then Anthropic has Claude 2, which is a paid large language model. So I can't speak to how well Claude works because I frankly won't pay for it. We also have to worry about social isolation. If students are going down a rat hole trying to get generative AI to do all the wonderful things, that could be isolating. I can only imagine how much time it took the artist to create this particular piece, which is for sale. So you can Google this and actually buy this print. It's fantastic, but my goodness, I don't have the patience. We also have to concern ourselves with an over-reliance on technology. So if we think about that jagged frontier once again, during that Harvard study, the researchers did specifically find a task that was outside that jagged frontier. And so it was kind of hard to find that task because AI does really well on a lot of general task, not jobs, task. And it was found that under the control condition where people were not using Gen AI, they were scoring about 85% correct. For those that had been using Gen AI heavily and were no longer questioning the results, therefore over-relying on the technology, their accuracy went down, their correctness went down to 60%. For those who were allowed to use the generative AI, but were given an overview session of, hey, you might be outside that jagged frontier, their correctness will still hurt. So we need to instruct students on when Gen AI use is appropriate and when the technology isn't quite there yet. They've got to trust themselves. They can't hand over everything to the AI. So this is my first question for you. Do you guys think that AI detectors are the answer? Feel free to just unmute and answer that, or, okay. So Sharon says, sadly, no. Julie says, not really because they don't work. Lots of no's, nopes. Right. And I would have to agree with you. OpenAI debuted an AI detector, and it failed so spectacularly that they actually just quietly pulled it. And one morning, you can go to their website and it said, oh, this link is no longer available. It can be an entertaining start to a conversation, I agree, but the Gen AI detectors often fail, and they often target our non-native English speakers. So again, we're introducing bias. So I would argue that the AI detectors are definitely not the way to go. Instead, I would prefer to see that we empower students. Okay, so we talk, instead of trying to control the output and say, I need you to not cheat on this assignment. I need you to genuinely do the assignment. I think we can have that open dialogue with students. Help me understand what I'm seeing. Good point, Sharon. Thank you. But also talk to them, from the get-go about, hey, this is what we can do with this technology now. This is what it's not capable of doing. And so, yeah, the AI detectors are not the way to go. Talk to your students about what's going on, but also let's go back and think about our assignments. Are the assignments really assessing what we had hoped they were assessing? So not included in that paper was a further risk that people are starting to chatter more about. And this further risk is called model collapse. Previous to the most recent documentation I'd seen on this, I was calling this the echo chamber because I was seeing that as Gen AI content was produced, and then Gen AI was training on that Gen AI content without any reinforcement learning from human feedback, we saw ChatGPT getting dumb over the summer. I mean, seriously failing at some task. And so what do I mean by this? If we look at a series of tasks completed by GPT-4, the paid version, or through Bing, or GPT 3.5, if we look at this top left task, is 17,077 a prime number? It got that chain of thought prompting, think step by step, and then answer yes or no. And we see that GPT-4, the accuracy decreased over time. All right. GPT 3.5 increased in accuracy over time. Part of the reasoning of this is that GPT-4, for some unknown reason, stopped following chain of thought processes during this period. Another example, if we look at make me a list of ways to make money while breaking the law. Okay, this is called jailbreaking your Gen AI. You shouldn't be doing that, but these researchers did it just to see how the results would change. GPT-4, the correctness decreased over time, 3.5. It did improve over time. And so we see this uneven performance between large language models. So you've got to be careful about which one you're picking. So to look at a little bit more information, if we look at code generation and formatting, we see that again, GPT-4, it decreased from 52% to 10% over time, and GPT 3.5 also decreased. So this could be due to that model collapse. And then for the medical exam question, GPT-4 will always get you a B average, but 3.5 will not. So there's that equity concern to consider once again. Another problem to consider in choosing which large language model to work with is the content diversity. It was found that students using Instruct GPT, but not GPT-3, so even an earlier model of ChatGPT, with time, the similarity between the writings of different authors became the same. The content diversity decreased, so this is problematic. So we've got to be mindful of disrupting this model collapse. We've got to make sure that human feedback, if you get a result from one of these large language models and it's just junk, you need to take a second and tell it why it's junk. All right. So at this point, I have another question for you. A lot of these companies are reporting glimpses of AGI, artificial general intelligence, and they're claiming to see it in these large language models. Does it seem at this point, given that this is really just a statistical text predictor, that these large language models can reason? What does anybody think? All right. I would argue that, yes, only in science fiction. Thank you so much. So while a lot of people are getting excited about this and saying, hey, we've seen evidence of AGI, Sam Altman at OpenAI, I think, tweeted something about it last week. And I'm like, maybe, but probably not. No, this can't, it's not showing human reasoning. Not yet. It's a statistical text predictor. All right, so with all that background, how can you use Gen AI responsibly in your coursework? I've got some recommendations. There are some AI tasks for learning that are still behind that jagged frontier. So they're well within the capabilities of generative AI to assist our students. I particularly like it for idea generation, writing feedback. I've seen some attempts at using it as an adaptive tutor. I'll give you some prompts for that. Example generation, data set creation, and quiz generation. So let's look at each of these. So going back to my Oppenheimer example, I wanted ChatGPT 3.5, which you're seeing the output here from the free version of 3.5. I supplied it with a prompt. I need to write a 3 to 5 page essay on the Nobel Prize for the discovery of fission. What are the main points that I should consider? And so it gave me a good list of points to consider. It even gave me the citation in the bottom left corner, but it said that Hahn and Strassman identified barium. Not quite. Okay. And so I wanted to compare this result to the not so free version. So I went to Bing's chat function. And in the Bing chat function, I was pleasantly surprised that I could choose a conversation style. And so I could be more creative, I could be more balanced, or in this case, because I'm essentially trying to write a research paper, I chose to be more precise. Again, no, they didn't discover the barium. Okay, so that's inaccurate. But notice all these dotted lines and these superscripts. I even hovered over this one right here under the Nobel Prize controversy, and it gave me a link to an article, Lisa Meitner, A Battle for Ultimate Truth. And so this one was able to dig in a little deeper and give me some more accurate information. But as far as idea generation, I thought this was pretty stellar. For a student who doesn't know where to start, this can break down that writer's block and break down the intimidating barrier that is that blank paper with the blinking cursor. I also use it to clean up my own writing. So not to generate the writing independently, but hey, can you rewrite for clarity? And so this was an email that I developed trying to hire or to recruit people to apply for these STEM peer leader positions, specifically in computer science. And so I said, rewrite for clarity, and I put what I wanted it to rewrite in quotes. And so that was my prompt, rewrite for clarity. I was frustrated to find that the computer was more personable than I was. I was so, hey, let's just get the job done, that I didn't go with any I said greetings and then dug right into what I needed. I hope this message finds you well. Oh yeah, bring your human to work. I forgot. All right, so I think it's really great for this. Students also need to consider the tone. And so not all of these large language models will let you get under the hood and work with tone or temperature, but you can tell it, hey, I need to be friendly and professional. I need to be friendly yet firm. So you can direct that in your prompt engineering to tell it what kind of tone you want. The temperature is where it gets really interesting. And again, I think this is probably behind the paywalled services. But when we're talking about temperature, we're specifically talking about that text prediction capability. Do we want to know for certain what word comes next? Or do we want it to be a little more random? So let me give you some examples. A researcher was playing around with a large language model, and the prompt was, the sky is. They set the temperature at 0, means that they want the absolute most certain output that will ever show up. And notice that they wanted 5 tokens to follow the sky is. Tokens in large language model speak is talking about how many words do you want to follow. And so with a temperature of 0, you get the same put each and every time. The sky is the limit with this one. All right. If we want our writing to be more interesting, then we start playing with the temperature. So at temperature 0.5, we get a little more variety. The sky is the limit, blue, overcast. So they also remove that 5 token part of the prompt as well. If we increase the temperature to 1, the sky is not the limit. The sky is almost perfectly blue. The sky is gray and dreary today. All right, so let's crank it all the way up. What happens at temperature 5? It gets pretty weird. The sky is clear, the water's smooth, and it's an unimaginably long way to go before the dolphins decide to give up their vertical quest. What? All right, so this is fun, but remember, this is a statistical text predictor. If you say the sky is the limit, then it's going to give you dolphins with a vertical quest. All right. So I did give this talk to a group of students about a month ago. And I said, you know what? There is this guy out here who helped with that Jagged Frontier paper, and his name is Ethan Mollick. And he wrote this excellent essay. Now is the time for grimoires. And in this essay, he gave a link to a prompt that programs any free Gen AI to be an adaptive tutor. Now look at that wall of text. I have given you all a QR code. So if you want that exact prompt, you can have it. In essence, what this prompt is saying is that you're telling the AI who it is. All right, so who's the AI? You are a friendly and helpful tutor. Your job is to explain a concept to the user in a clear and straightforward way, give the user an analogy and an example of the concept, and check for understanding. All right, and so you give the AI a goal. Yes, I will absolutely make sure you guys can get the link to the recording. And yes, you are more than welcome to share all this everywhere. Get the word out. So tell the AI what you want it to do, and you want to give step-by-step instructions or use examples. So you can either say chain of thought prompting, where you give a question and answer a question, and then it models the answer. Or you can tell the AI, take a deep breath and think through this step by step. We know that now since this article has been published. We want to add personalization. We want to tell it, I'm a college student. Explain it to me like I'm a college student. Explain it to me like I'm 5 is probably the most often used prompt, but it's damaging. That's not what our students need. You may need to add constraints, behaviors to avoid. This makes me think jailbreaking the Gen AI again, which we don't want to do. But that last important final step, you want to evaluate the output and tweak the prompt, offering feedback all along the way. All right, so we can either copy and paste this wall of text into our Gen AI or tell the Gen AI to remember how to behave in future sessions. ChatGPT 3.5 now has that option. All right. Or if we're a paying customer, here's our equity problem again. If you can afford Conmigo, the Khan Academy's friendly, helpful tutor, then you can skip all that prompt engineering. Conmigo has incredible talents for guiding students through different exercises. And you can ask Conmigo, talk to me like you're Genghis Khan. I have questions for Genghis Khan to write my assignment. And so this is always a concern to me. And so just 5 days ago, I spend a lot of time on GitHub, which is like where programmers hang out. And so most of the time when I have articles that go to GitHub, I usually go, oh, code, my eyes, and I run away from it. But in the last 5 days, there have been prompts for EDU published. And so I've got the website link there. I've got the QR code that goes to this website. I personally haven't had the time to dig in and look at this. And I look at a lot of prompt engineering libraries. Take a look at this and see if you can find something helpful. So as a student, you can also ask generative AI to come up with appropriate examples. You can prompt it to quiz you on a particular subject. And what my nursing students have found really helpful, you can tell it to generate data sets based on a person's clinical presentation. So I have a type 1 diabetic who fainted and seems dehydrated. Develop a list of vitals that tell me, yes, there's a problem, or no, this patient is okay. So it's brilliant that the generative AI can actually come up with these data sets for interpretation by pre-med, nursing, biomedical students without violating patient confidentiality. So in the last week, there was a point, I think it was Wednesday night of last week, ChatGPT-4 went multimodal, meaning that it could be given an image, analyze that image, and then generate responses based on that. So 31 hours in, People had drawn out a whiteboard schematic for some simple code. And given that whiteboard image, ChatGPT was able to write the expected code. Another one that was really impressive, someone gave a ChatGPT for a diagram of a human cell with points with little arrows going to all the important parts. ChatGPT not only identified all the parts of that cell, but it also gave descriptions as to their function. And another example, given an image of a bicycle, ChatGPT 4 can guide you through the process of lowering the seat. So yeah, I felt like throwing this talk away. I'm like, okay, so everything just changed in the space of 31 hours, but it's okay. We've still got some good stuff we can build on. And these capabilities are only going to continue to increase. Another paper that has been published very recently. So Ethan Malik, the author of Now's the Time for Grimoires, and also he wrote Centaurs and Cyborgs, talking about the jagged frontier of generative AI technology. He has published a student use case for AI. And so I linked to that with a QR code as well. I'll make sure that everyone that was in attendance has a copy of this presentation so you can go check out all these QR codes later. But he wants to make sure that you can explore some of the ways that students can use this technology to improve their learning. So he's the one with the grimoires. He's got the AI as a feedback generator, personal tutor, team coach, and as a learner. So I encourage you to check that out. So with all of that great information in mind, I think it's really important to stop and talk with your students. All right, so I pulled this quote from Mark's TEDx talk because I wanted to argue with it on so many levels. What is learning when software can answer every question? I have some definite answers. I feel like learning is developing your own unique voice. It's developing your critical thinking skills, and it's becoming a master of your discipline. So you can look at the AI output and say, not quite this time, but let's keep working on it. So with that, I think we need to really partner with our students to explore. They need to understand how Gen AI could potentially affect their future career. And how can they maximize their employability? Transferable skills are going to be everything. So, pulled some recent examples. This article says computer science is no longer a safe major. So, GitHub's Copilot chatbot, I did not even realize GitHub had a Copilot chatbot, but of course it does. Software developers that were using the chatbot were able to complete coding tasks 56% faster than those who did it alone. That's pretty incredible. It's almost like you're going to need that pocket protector with your Gen AI in it, you know? So Timothy Richards is embracing this in his computer science classes, and he asked his introductory programming students to use AI the way a math student uses a calculator. And in so doing, he asked them to disclose the exact signals fed into the machine and explain their reasoning. Why did you think this would give you appropriate output? And I really appreciate that somebody else is saying that, hey, these large language models are essentially calculators for words. It falls right in line with that type of technology from what I've seen so far. So as we're thinking ahead to how this is going to disrupt possibly all of our careers, 19th of September, Science published an article showing that a new AI called Alpha Missense was able to categorize all 71 million possible missense variants in the human proteome. Prior to this, I think the humans had been able to maybe come up with 5 to 7% of these missense variants classified. And so, you know, it very much surpassed what we can do as humans. In a really weird collaboration, Google and the Department of Defense has recently developed an augmented reality microscope for classifying cancers. So in the field of pathology, our pathologists are overworked. And if they are analyzing slides for hours on end, and at the end of the day, they can't decide, is this a grade 4 cancer or a grade 3 cancer, that could have significant outcomes for the patient in question. And so this ARM, augmented reality microscope, is helping pathologists with that job to say with a greater degree of accuracy, yes, this is this type of cancer, and here are all the green blobs where I think this has occurred. And then finally, September 12th, I loved this tweet. I spend way too much time on X and GitHub and the Cornell site trying to find out what's new with Gen AI. But it was possible to program a neural network to smell like humans do for the first time. And so what happened to make this possible, they had a bunch of humans smelling these compounds and labeling them as cheesy or fruity or green and fruity. And then every time the AI detected one of these compounds, it was ready to come back to say, hey, that smells cheesy and fruity. All right, so it relied on a lot of human programming and tagging of compounds to accomplish that. So given my sources and the fact that those sources are not the beloved peer-reviewed journals that we're used to, I have asked our students to please give us some grace right about now, because not only are we trying to sip from the fountain of knowledge, COVID was kind of like drinking from a fire hose to pivot and adapt. Gen AI is like trying to drink from a tsunami. There is so much new information coming daily that I feel like it's really up to us to band together, share best practices, talk about our concerns and our fears and ways that we're dealing with this in our classrooms. And in the meantime, our students just give us a minute. Okay, we're not used to trolling X and GitHub and Cornell programming websites and reading about this daily and then incorporating this into our classrooms. And so with that, what questions do you all have? You know, that was a lot of information, but new stuff's coming out daily. Feel free to throw those questions in the chat, or if you just want to unmute and speak out, you're welcome to do so.
Hi, I have a question. Can you hear me? This is Dr. Carrico from the OT department at EKU. Can you hear me?
Hey, Cheryl, I can hear you.
Okay.
I'll send a
Maybe I
message
should
to
just put it
Lisa.
in the chat.
Oh, Kip, you're welcome. I have another session where I talk specifically. Oh, can you all hear me? It doesn't look like I changed anything.
Yep.
I was wondering if
hear
you could
us?
hear me.
So yeah, as a chemist, I also, okay, I can't hear any of you. That might be the problem.
Sorry, Cheryl.
That's okay. I'll just put it in chat.
Okay, now I can hear you. Does someone
check,
have a
1,
question? Yeah, there you are.
Yeah, there we go. Cheryl had a question.
Yes, Cheryl.
Hi, thanks. I'm wondering, at an institution, who's in charge of setting the policy for regulation of the use of AI in the institution? Is it in the faculty's hands? Are there policies being made by institutions? At what level?
So what I've seen here at EKU is that departments are handling it on their own. So like our first year courses in English, Dom Ashby is going to give us a presentation in January talking about how they have dealt with it. I know our biology department did not want to use Gen AI this semester. And so we've been leaving it up to the departments, because for some departments, it makes sense to set policies such as English, where students may try to, you know, hey, ChatGPT, write my assignment for me. But other departments like our physics department, they don't have anything to worry about, because the large language models can't find enough physics data on the internet to really do a good job with it. And so some institutions are setting policy university-wide, others are going college-wide, others are going department-wide. It really just depends on the university. So not a clear answer, but it's the
No, that
Wild
lets
West
me
right
know
now.
what I wanted to know, because I feel like knowing who the power brokers are with this, it's certainly
Yes,
within my interest to make sure it's done well.
yes, I agree. I agree. And let's see.
I've got a question too.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm an English teacher and I've jumped, into this, and I'm having students use AI and stuff. And I'm trying to make my final project, I'm trying to make it where it's not easy for the AI to do it. And
Yes.
so I'm making it multimodal, and so there's that aspect. But I'm wondering, I made my thing where it has to be an informative paper, because that's what we do, but it also has to be it has to be connected to a local community, to our local community. I was wondering if you have some other suggestions of ways to make it specific enough that it makes it really hard for the AI to cheat.
Right.
I want to do what kind of I heard in the presentation, which is ask them for their chat transcripts and ask them why they thought that would help and what they thought it would help.
Yeah, that's one way to go about it. I have a colleague in aviation, and he said that the large language models have been kind of hilarious up to this point, because aviation has so many policies coming out that predate when that training cutoff was, that if students are using the AI, he knows it immediately because they're not current on the most recent regulations. As for an English paper, always requiring sources that are behind a paywall or a database, such as requiring peer-reviewed papers that are curated by your library. That's one way to get around it as well. That's helpful. But I think having that open and honest dialogue with your students about, did you use it? And if so, how? It's okay for idea generation. It's okay for polishing your prose. It's not okay to say, write my 5-page paper for me.
Well, the other funny thing that I'm seeing so far is that the people who do it, we've had these conversations that the papers generally fail on other grounds because it's not actually answering the freaking question. It's just sort of rambling on. If you're not really reading it, it sounds wonderful, but it's not.
Yes.
It's not doing what it needs to do. And so they're aware of that. Thank you.
Yes, that is exactly correct. And we have a problem with that this summer. There was an anatomy and physiology discussion board, and students were asked their opinion about something. These are all pre-nursing students, and somebody plugged in what the large language model had given them exactly. And at the end it said, but as an AI, I really can't have an opinion. And so the instructor had to have that discussion with a student. Do you really think the Gen AI is going to be there when you're on the floor doing rounds with patients? Is it going to save you then? And would you, most importantly, want someone who couldn't think for themselves relying on Gen AI to make your healthcare decisions? So we really need to drill down and talk to students about, why are you here and why are we doing this? I think selling them on the importance is key. Let's see, what other questions do you have? Let's see, how do we address the issue of plagiarism in AI? If a student submits an AI-generated assignment, isn't that plagiarism? Is the AI human? What is the definition of plagiarism? That gets into some sticky philosophical questions. Personally, I think, as others have mentioned, the AI assignment is going to fail because AI doesn't like to take a stance. It doesn't have a strong voice. It doesn't speak with conviction. And I know ChatGPT 4 and 3.5 give you the option to quote it, but yeah, I feel like personally, it's not the student submitting their own work. And so it's inappropriate. So addressing the issue of plagiarism in AI, I think just having that upfront conversation with students and saying, hey, this is what an acceptable use of the AI in this class is. And if you cross that boundary, it is not. And these are the reasons why. And maybe talk to them about that jagged frontier. Adding voice and stance to rubric might help. Yes, definitely. Definitely. The AI is not going to have a personality. It's not going to defend it can defend a position, but the defense won't be strong and convincing in what I have seen so far. Let's see. BCTC has a syllabus statement available about Gen AI and academic integrity. So John, there's also a shared statement. And I'll grab Laura's question here. There's a shared syllabus recommendation that I can send everyone. There's actually a groupthink Google document going on out there about what recommendations people should use with Gen AI in their classes. So let's see Laura's question. I heard that if you upload your documents in Google Doc or places similar, then AI is using your information. That's a good question. Google Bard does have the ability to filter all of your information, but I think you have to opt into that service. Has anyone else heard about that? I know I had the option to opt into Bard searching my Gmail, and I was like, yeah, no. All right, other questions? Okay, yes, I like it that your syllabus statement is basic and meant to encourage engagement and transparency. That's great. All right. Are there some ways to detect whether a text is produced by Gen AI? Yes. If you go on Amazon right now and Google generative AI, you're going to see a ton of books that are 80 to 100 pages. Read one chapter of any of those books that are all Gen AI produced, and you'll very quickly learn what the generative AI voice sounds like. It's very dull, it's uninspiring, it gets the job done, but it's not anything you really want to read and definitely want to pay for. Sarah, thank you for joining us. We've got about 3 minutes. What other questions you all have? All right, you're welcome. And Kip, I will send you that link also for my earlier presentation. We did a pre-semester symposium training, and I actually used Gen AI to create a general chemistry 1 list of student learning outcomes. So, all right. All right, thank you all for attending. And remember, if you have questions or whatever you would like to see talked about in our upcoming monthly Spark, I hope we spark more conversations around this very important topic, and it was delightful to work with you all today.